Revd Tim Goodbody, and I am the Director of Ordinands for the Diocese of Chelmsford, and this is the Advent Sunday sermon titled Keep Awake. If falling asleep on the sofa were an Olympic sport, I would be a multi-medal winning champion. For some, falling asleep on the sofa is just a seasonal thing, a Christmas or a birthday event, undertaken for special occasions when families gather around the fire, around the TV. But for me, it's all year round. I just doze off when I'm relaxed. How ironic, therefore, that I've chosen to preach on this text, Keep Awake, as we begin our Advent journey today. In doing so, I hope to be for you what my family and my friends over there are for me when we are in front of the TV with a log fire crackling in the grate. The one to stop you from dropping off to sleep with a swift word of warning, a sharp call of your name. After all, we go on this journey together, just like the pilgrims to Jerusalem, foreseen by Isaiah. They travel in groups. It's let us go up, not I will go up. The picture of a renewed Zion, drawing all nations to itself as a place of God's dwelling, is hard not to read today as an ideal for the church. And perhaps as this turbulent year of perma-crisis, multiple prime ministers and a new monarch comes to an end, it will be a good thing to stop and refocus on that ideal. Because the church has got a lot to deal with right now. And sometimes, in so doing, we can lose sight of our vision, wander from the pathway, get distracted. Advent is at the same time about faith and about uncertainty. Now, some would say that those are opposites, but bear with me, and we shall see how they fit together. You see, an Advent faith is a faith in the coming of Christ and in his return. It's about two beginnings, really. His birth, that we mark at Christmas, and his return, which we celebrate. And that's the uncertainty. We do not know the day or the hour, which is why we are called to vigilance, to be alert, to keep awake. And I know it is hard to live with uncertainty, especially with so much change, so much instability and challenge in our own church and nation, and of course in the wider world as well. I'm sure you'd have heard it before, but it bears repeating, that in the coming onslaught of mince pies, movies, adverts and advocat, pantos, prosecco and Christmas trees, we would do well to hold fast to that command from our Lord to keep awake, for we do not know the day or hour of his return. How strange that Advent, the season in which we are most focused on that return of our Lord in our worship, is also the busiest time in the church's year because of all those additional events that fill up our diaries. The call to readiness from Matthew 24 is not actually about making sure the decorations are all up and the presents wrapped in time for Christmas. It's not even about making sure our hearts are ready for the emotions of the nativity play, or the Christingle service, or the midnight communion. The call to readiness is is in preparation for the coming of the Son of Man. But why do we need to be ready? It's intriguing that Jesus refers to the days of Noah here. But he isn't talking about the animals 2 by 2 in the ark. Those swept away by the flood were not expecting God to act in judgment, so they were caught out. As John Proctor writes in his People's Bible Commentary on this passage, the story of Noah is an account of normal life being utterly submerged by the intervention and judgment of God. The message here is that we should not take God for granted. The world is not so fully under our control as we often imagine. However usual business may appear to be, there is a greater issue that should always concern and shape the church. How ready are we? End quote. Now, Proctor published that commentary in 2001, only just over 2 decades ago, but in a time of much greater stability, peace and prosperity than we find ourselves in today. We are much more aware today that the world is not under our control. Global warming, global security issues such as the re-emergence of Russia as a global threat are just a couple of the issues contributing to this lack of control and our increasing knowledge of that. Because we like to be in control, don't we? We like to know what's in the diary for this week, for next week, for next year, so that we can plan our lives. And that's true of individuals and churches and governments. Uncertainty is not fashionable today, especially for the generations who've grown up with all the information of the internet at their fingertips. We've grown accustomed to getting answers and getting them immediately. Perhaps that natural human tendency was behind the questions the disciples asked Jesus at the beginning of Matthew 24. Verse 3 says, "Tell us, when will this be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" So in Matthew, before the narrative of the passion, death and resurrection of our Lord, we have his followers already trying to get handle on the new messianic age. Just like us, they want to know so that they can plan. A wise man once taught me that there is a difference between planning and preparation. He was talking about flexibility in leading informal worship. But I've always felt this to be a useful adage in life and faith more generally. And it's key to the point in which Matthew is saying to us in chapter 24. We cannot control the timing of the second advent. We cannot plan it like a carol service or an office Christmas party. But we can prepare for it. We can ensure our vigilance, our readiness, our wakefulness. And how do we do that? Well, like most questions in Sunday school, the answer, of course, is Jesus. Or, to be more specific, for us, his earthly family, the church. Just as Isaiah gave a clarion call to the people to go up to the mountain of the Lord to receive instruction, arbitration, peace and light, so Matthew in these verses and in the chapters that follow is very specific about how to be ready. Readiness is in itself an act of obedience, but it's not a passive, static state of readiness, just waiting, like waiting for a bus. Rather, the readiness, the wakefulness, the vigilance to which we are called is centred on faithful obedience to what we've been taught and faithful stewardship of what we've been given in terms of resources and in terms of gifts. In the parables that follow Matthew 24, precede the Passion narrative, there is a lot of teaching about faithful obedience in expectation. Looking after what you're given, making the best use of it to the glory of God. For me, that's the best way the church can remain focused on the tasks before us and not get distracted by the gaudy baubles which line our path. One last thing. I started, as I awoke, by saying that I do tend to fall asleep on the sofa when I'm supposed to be awake. Yet, when I do go to bed eventually, I cannot sleep if there's a light on. I stay awake. For the church, as for this Christian, the best way of ensuring we are awake and ready for Christ is found in the closing verse of our first reading. O house of Jacob, come, let us walk in the light of the Lord. Now, today in the 21st century, we don't necessarily, in this nation, have mountains or arcs to go to on this pilgrimage. But it's not for nothing that churches are built to be visible in the landscape, to attract pilgrims just as Mount Zion did. And it's not for nothing even that the main part of the church building in our culture, the nave, derives its name from its resemblance to a ship. So this Advent, let us be prepared, let us keep awake, and let us work together to increase the number of pilgrims alongside whom we walk.